right, I think we'll get started. And just ensure everyone is muted so we don't have any disruptions. And welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Michael Murphy, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Manager for the Faculty of Education here at UBC. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. Please note the panel will be recorded through Zoom and the video will be made available after the event. The recording may contain attendees' names and images. If you're not comfortable being recorded, kindly turn off your camera and video. You may also change your display name to something generic, such as participant or anonymous. This can be done very easily by selecting yourself from the participant list and editing your name. We also kindly ask that you mute your mic during the duration of the event, and you are welcome to type questions to the panelists in the chat box. So a warm welcome to everyone tonight. I'll now like to acknowledge that UBC's Vancouver Point Grey campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam people. I would also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places, near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. If you're unsure on whose lands you are today, I encourage you to visit native-land.ca to learn more. As part of this event, it's important for us to recognize that we are all coming here from different backgrounds and different experiences. These are challenging times, both with COVID-19 pandemic, anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, and anti-Asian racism in our communities and around the globe. We encourage the UBC community to join us in reflecting on what actions we can take individually and together to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our daily lives. I am now delighted to introduce my co-host for this evening's panel, Mary Costandi. Mary is a PhD candidate in educational studies. She is the initiative lead for the Diverse Career Paths of Educational Studies alumni, and I am absolutely delighted to be working with her on this project and to be her co-host for this evening's panel. Please welcome Mary.
Thanks, Michael. Michael has been a fantastic alumni engagement mentor and a huge source of support on so many levels. We could not have reached this point in the project without him. I'm so excited to be here today and with you in our inaugural panel. And I'd like to start by sharing a little bit about what motivated me to initiate this work. As graduate students, we're surrounded by academics, and that's a great thing. I mean, after all, we are in an academic institution and that's how we learn. But sometimes when graduate students think about their career or what they'll do after graduation and look around for answers, it becomes easy to imagine academia as an option. And sometimes we're stuck in thinking it's the only option. At the same time, the field of education is quite wide and diverse. One could be an educator in a myriad of ways and places. One can also work in diverse capacities within an educational setting. Some career paths are more visible for graduate students, and others are just less obvious. The diverse career path of educational studies alumni aims to bridge that gap by supporting students in learning about diverse career pathways. One primary way we aim to do so is by learning from alumni who have gone before us. The diverse career path of educational studies alumni is both a study and an initiative. The study component, with it, we aim to learn about all the careers of all of EDST alumni, whether MA, MEd, EDD, or PhD. We've shared a survey with our alumni, and we're grateful to everyone who's participated so far. And we're delighted to see that alumni going back to the 70s have participated and indicated interest in being involved with graduate students. The initiative piece involves a series of events and activities that aim to foreground alumni stories and career experiences. Through this initiative, we want to highlight not only stories of success, but also stories of barriers and of struggles. Stories that speak to the lived experiences of alumni after they graduate. We understand that the playing field is not level. We're cognizant that one's identity, gender, race, age, class, citizenship all play a role in shaping one's career experiences. We hope that through the survey and blog stories, alumni profiles, and diverse events, that we highlight the complexity of it all. I'd like to also introduce and thank the team who are supporting this work. We're funded by the Faculty of Education Learning Transformed grant, which has Michael Murphy as the PI and fantastic alumni engagement mentor. And we're also funded by the UBC Advancing Education Renewal with Dr. Andre Mazewi as PI, my supervisor and amazing mentor. As co-investigators in the study, we're working with Dr. Allison Taylor, Dr. Deidre Kelly, and Dr. Jude Walker. In addition, I'd like to thank our campus partners who provide invaluable mentorship and advice in support of our event planning and resource development. Jackie Brinkman, Director of Graduate Student Professional Development and at the Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, and Daniel Barkley, Graduate Career Educator at the Center for Student Involvement and Careers. Thank you so much for all the work that you do to support this study and initiative. One last thing I want to share is that I sometimes imagine sectors as lying on a form of continuum of visibility for graduate students. You can think of them as a form of consecutive, though overlapping circles at time. They're not neatly divided in any real or ontological way, and this is just a figment of my imagination, a theory if you wish. At the center lies the graduate student, and within the immediate vicinity is academia and the academic culture. And right outside of that is the higher education setting. And through work-learn positions and networks one creates, administrative or teaching position in a higher education setting become perhaps more visible for graduate students and a feasible option. Outside of that, perhaps is the nonprofit sector, and through community engagement, volunteer experiences, it becomes easier to learn about possibilities for the work in the nonprofit sector. And perhaps less visible is the public sector. And in fact, for some, it might be a black box, like what kind of work can one do with a degree in education in the municipal, provincial, or federal level? And then right outside of it, perhaps, is the private sector. Now, beyond all of those fields and sectors, a much more difficult route to take is to create your own job. Imagine, it's already a substantial amount of work to find and apply for a job, but create your own one. That's what Courageous Alumni in our panel are doing. With this inaugural panel, we want to foreground those voices of people whom we may not come across or interact with as part of our academic learning. Those are voices of EDST alumni who took huge risks and leaps of faith to found their own businesses, foundations, nonprofits, or initiatives. We hope that this panel would inspire graduate students and alumni in imagining broader work possibilities, not only possibilities that are out there, but possibilities they can successfully create. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce this evening's moderator, Dr. Suzanne Scott. Suzanne is also a UBC alum with a PhD from Educational Studies. She currently serves as the Assistant Dean, Development and Alumni Engagement for the Faculty of Education. In this role, Suzanne oversees the fundraising priorities for the Faculty of Education, including the School of Kinesiology. She directs a team of professionals, of alumni engagement professionals who engage more than 55,000 alumni living in over 100 countries. Over to you, Dr. Scott.
Thank you so much, Mary. This is a really exciting opportunity for us to gather together virtually. I want to say just a quick special hello to my supervisors, Dr. Dawn Fisher and Dr. Amy Metcalf. I think I might have seen Dr. Metcalf come tonight. I'm absolutely delighted to have this conversation with some very interesting people, some of whom that I know from the PhD cohort that I was in. And a few housekeeping things. Once again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat box. We have limited time, so I hope to get to most of them, but I may not be able to answer all or have the panel answer your questions. So let's carry on. Our first panelist is Brigitte Gem. She's an educational studies alum who completed her PhD in 2009. She's the chief meal planner and founder of Vegan Family Kitchen. Brigitte trained and worked for over 15 years in the fields of the sociology of science and higher education. During that period, she alternated between policy activism, project management, and research. Our second panelist is Erica Mohan. Erica completed her Master's of Education in 2003 and her PhD in 2010. She is the founder and executive director of Community Education Partnerships, CEP, a nonprofit that provides educational support to pre-K to grade 12 students facing homelessness and housing insecurity in the San Francisco Bay Area. And next is Isabeau Iqbal. Isabeau has 3 degrees from UBC, a Bachelor of Science focused on dietetics, a Master's of Arts in Adult Education, and her PhD in Educational Studies. Isabeau is a career and life coach who helps ambitious perfectionists in higher education discover, appreciate, and apply their strengths so that they can experience more joy in their professional and personal lives. And our final panelist is Sam Brad. Sam is a recent grad from UBC holding an MEd in Educational Studies, but he's also certified in Human Systems Dynamics and Integral Facilitation, and is a dialogue associate with the SFU Center for Dialogue. Sam is a graphic facilitator, meeting facilitator, and the founder of Drawing Change. He combines 20 years of facilitation experience with visual tools to help groups engage, solve problems, and lead. Thank you everyone for joining us. Now I'd like to invite the panelists to turn on their mics. And we'll get started with the first question. And I will go in order of how I introduced you. So I'm going to start with Brigitte. And I'd like to know, why did you decide to pursue graduate studies? And how, if any way, did EDST inform your current work choices?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm super happy to be here. So originally, my career objectives were not to become an academic per se, but I always wanted to be involved in higher education policymaking and kind of higher level administration. And so that is a field where having a PhD is basically a requirement if you want to become a meaningful interlocutor in those kinds of positions. And so as I was doing my bachelor's and my master's, it became clear that I would have to continue to the PhD level to do that. And I did my bachelor's and master's in Montreal at University of Quebec at Montreal. And I knew also it would be valuable to step outside of my comfort zone a little bit. And we had the team I was working with there had some connections with UBC. And I was delighted to be accepted into the program and come and work with Dawn Fisher and Amy Metcalf. Hi, Amy, if you're here. I haven't seen Dawn, but hello too, if you're here. And I was also, I mean, there were career objectives, but I was also, and I think that's a requirement for anybody starting a PhD, extremely curious about one question. And that question was, how do universities relate with society? And always being a little bit on the edge of it, but also within society, obviously. And more specifically, I had a keen interest in university industry relationships in natural resource extraction fields. And more specifically, it turned out to be doing a PhD study on the training of PhD students in the field of forest research. And so I was actually really curious about that question, and it carried me through the PhD program. So that is what drove me to do a PhD in ed studies specifically.
And Erica, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm super honored to be on this panel, and hopefully I have some interesting information to share with everyone. Starting with why graduate work in ed studies. I think it's important at the outset to say, you know, I'm working in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that's where I'm originally from. And just starting at a young age, even myself moving between schools, becoming so aware of educational inequities. And I started doing a credentialing program and realized, there was a lot of focus on the how of teaching. And I wanted to spend a bit more time sort of diving deeper into understanding why are in very predictable ways some students underperforming or underserved. And so I thought, I'll go and do some graduate studies. And then next thing I know, I found myself doing the PhD, but still really feeling myself being drawn to the students, right? And wanting to work with the students. All of my work in ed studies was really in some way focused on social justice. And so, how did my graduate work inform my current practice? It's hard to even disentangle them. Almost everything from what I learned in classes, the actual experiences of being a grad student in ed studies have really informed the work that I'm doing now and shaped how I think about it and how I approach it.
Thank you. And Isabeau.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We weren't sure if anybody would show up. It's so beautiful outside if you're in Vancouver. So thank you so much for giving up a little bit of sunshine and being here with us today. So I, as Suzanne mentioned, did both my master's and my PhD in ed studies. And quite honestly, I went and did a master's in ed studies, I think mostly because I wasn't quite sure what to do. And I just had a baby, and it seemed like a good idea to go to graduate school. I'm not quite sure why. And I saw that a common interest in the various jobs that I'd had was that something to do with adult education. So decided to apply for and do a master's there. And was so fortunate to have Shauna. I saw that Shauna was here as one of the first faculty members that I encountered, and she was later on my committee, and it was just such a positive experience. So then, towards the end of my master's, I ended up in a field called educational development. I'll say a little bit more about that after, and it was the fact that I loved that work and felt that having a PhD would serve me well in my work as an educational developer, that then, and plus the positive experience that I'd had in ed studies. That is largely why I went and did a PhD, because I could see that if I was going to pursue a field that is in higher education, that certain opportunities would be open to me if I had a PhD, whereas those opportunities I sort of guessed might not be as many if I didn't have a PhD. So that's what brought me back to ed studies to do a PhD.
And Sam, I'd love to know more about your choice for going into graduate school.
Well, I'll just echo that it really is an honor to be on this panel. And I didn't know that I wanted to go to grad school. So I'm the first generation of my family to do a bachelor. And so it took me a really long time. So this is to all the students who are out there who also took a really long time to do their undergrad work. I was like 7-8 years at some point, working and going to school, working and going to school. And at some point, I was working in the nonprofit sector and loving it and expecting that I was going to stay in the nonprofit sector for a really long time. But there were these questions that just kept pulling me. And I realized that actually what was being called for in order to really continue the analysis that I wanted to do around feminism, around gender, around racial justice, disability issues, it was going to mean taking the time away from work and going back to school. And so I went to UBC to do what I thought was going to be the 2-year program, ended up doing the exact same thing, which was working and going to school and working and going to school and working and going to school. And that praxis was really powerful. So how it informed all of the career choices was being able to do my work and go to do the classroom and meet people and talk about it. That's like that was the best part. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's go back to Brigitte, because I know we're really keen to know, and please tell us more about your current work and how did it begin? Did you have sort of one foot in academia, kind of testing the idea of doing something out on your own? We'd love to know more about your current work.
Yeah. you know, I come from a family of, first of a very big traditional, you know, baby boom Quebecois family. I think I have 26 aunts and uncles and over 100, you know, first degree cousins. And most of those people are entrepreneurs of some sort, have, you know, construction businesses and things like that. I'm also the first generation to go anywhere past, you know, high school in my family, and not my complete family, but at least in my personal family. And so this idea of having a business, starting a business, was never something that was completely foreign to me. I was running a corn stand when I was a teenager, and sometime, you know, I paid for my undergrad education with working as an IT consultant back in the day. So that was not really a scary thing for me. But nevertheless, my heart was with higher education and research, policymaking for the most part, bringing change and how exactly how academia works with the greater world. And however, the year was 2014. I had one child already. I had another child on the way. And at the time, I had a wonderful job. I have to say it was my dream job in so many ways, what I had trained for. I was the manager of research services in the Faculty of Education. So after my PhD was completed in 2009, I worked at the National Research Council for a couple of years, mostly around clean energy topics. So I was writing, you know, on behalf of the scientists, their proposals and kind of policy papers. And then I came back to the Faculty of Education, and I was working with a fantastic faculty trying to promote their work and help them do all the stuff around research that's not exactly research was something I was very passionate about. But at the same time, I was becoming very impatient. I had, as I was saying, my second child was on the way, and I could see all the enormous problems that society is struggling with, and climate change, environmental destruction, social inequalities. And as much as I appreciate the contributions of fundamental research and basic research and free research, and I think those things are necessary, I personally had a drive to have a more direct impact into the practice. And there's this phrase that Malcolm K. Huber, the person who coined the concept of peak oil, he said in the 60s, he said, our problem is not our ignorance, it's our failure to use the knowledge we actually have. And if we think of things like climate change and environmental destruction, we know very well what we're supposed to be doing about those things, we're just not doing it. And so I was really itching to go back more on the front lines. And at the same time, I have to say, as a mother of now 2 children, my husband's career was taking off, and he was not able to be as present as he was before for childcare. And being in BC, where the childcare infrastructure really, frankly, leaves to be desired, it was just not possible anymore for me. Well, I mean, it could maybe have been possible, but it would have been extremely stressful to continue in my administrative job at UBC and have the 2 kids at the same time. So I think it was a bit of a push-pull situation where I was like, you know, I could keep on doing this, but it would be extremely stressful. Why don't we make lifestyle choices that allow me to be more of a primary caregiver? My husband can start his career for now, and I will do something different and try to find out what I can do to really have direct impact. So that's my long story in starting this tiny company. And I ended up zooming in on vegan cooking, as I think it's on the one hand, it's a solution to environmental issues that can really make a big contribution. And it's also a service that people will pay for, and that it can be the basis of a viable small business. And it was a bit of a longer process to figure that out, but eventually that's what I found, and here I am.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. And I hope there's a place for us to share your resources for all of you so that we can follow your journey and perhaps even do some shopping. Erica, we're very keen to learn about your journey and what made you take a completely different approach to.
Yes. Well, if you remember from my first response, I thought that I wanted to get more into the sort of theory and study of education. And then towards the end of my PhD, I was feeling pretty deep into the theory and the writing and really disconnected from students and the, you know, the children that I'd actually gone into education to work with and to be with and to support. And I tell this story all the time. I went on volunteermatch.com and it actually just changed the trajectory of my life. I started working with a student. I was just finishing up my dissertation. I was living in Los Angeles. And I started tutoring one student who I was matched with through School on Wheels, which is an organization with a very similar mission, serving Southern California. And then I started working with his brother, and then I started working with another student and another student. And I defended in, someone on this call will know better. It's, I think, in May you defend, is that right? April. Anyways, I defended in the spring and went back down to Southern California, and School on Wheels said, do you want to run our learning center on Skid Row? And I did not have a tenure track job lined up at the end of my PhD. And so I ended up, but I hadn't, you know, I really hadn't entertained going on the job market at that point. Like I really realized that this was the work that I was feeling very called to do. And I was just enjoying it so much. So I took that job, probably my favorite job I've ever had. But I'm not from Los Angeles. I'm from the Bay Area. And for various reasons, it was really important to me to go back home. And so I really just sort of assumed I would be doing the same work. And then I got to the San Francisco Bay Area and realized there was no organization like School on Wheels in the San Francisco Bay Area. I would love to tell you that this was a really thought out decision. But I actually just drove to Sacramento and incorporated CEP, kind of, probably, you know, should have thought about it a bit more, but very much with School on Wheels' blessing. And I always say that I'm standing on their shoulders. They really, you know, supported me through the first few years of this. And it's funny because this is a job I really just don't want to have. Like 11 years ago when I started CEP, in my mind, I'm like, surely we're going to figure out family homelessness in the next few years and this won't be needed. And of course, over the years, it's just gotten worse and worse. But that's kind of how I got to doing this work.
So interesting. Isabeau, over to you. Tell us about your journey.
Well, as a career and life coach, I'm loving hearing these career stories. I love people's career stories. It's so fun. I was really looking forward to this evening. How to make this concise. So I finished my PhD in 2012, and I went back to working more at the Teaching and Learning Center, where I have a part-time position at the UBC Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. And within a fairly short time, I grew somewhat frustrated by what I perceived as a lack of opportunity for career growth. And at the same time, I had been a client of coaching since my early 20s, so for a really long time. And as a client of coaching, I had found coaching immensely powerful. So that was kind of one piece of it, is that, and then the other piece of it is that during my PhD, I was very fortunate to study with Amy, who's here this evening, and she introduced me to academic cultures, and it was a huge part of my PhD, and it brought me closer to the human experience that academics are living, specifically in my study around faculty members, about their experience. And then layered on top of that, both my parents are professors and were UBC professors. So I kind of had like academic culture coming at me from different places. And as I started to get more drawn to coaching as a practice, I then really wanted to, higher education has been just such a big part of my life. And then with the added study of academic cultures in my PhD and my own parents', journeys and my own as well, I felt really drawn to working with higher education professionals because I could see how much stress they were experiencing, and for a variety of reasons. Um, that was something that I wanted to do, was to be able to support people to have careers where they felt more fulfilled. Almost is just feels like not the right word, but it's the word that I'm choosing. So more satisfied, more fulfilled. So that was really a bit of what brought me to coaching.
I'm so glad you brought up that word fulfillment, because that'll be my next question after we hear from Brad. But sorry, Sam. Sam, please share with us your journey, and you still have the opportunity to do your PhD. So
I know.
any thoughts?
I was going to say, the more I listen to people, the more tempting it really is. Yes. So I had a really unexpected career journey. I did not know that the job that I have now existed. And so I'm a graphic facilitator. I mean, I knew meeting facilitation was a thing, but I didn't know that graphic facilitation was a job. And so for everybody else out there who has also never heard of graphic facilitation, I think it might be good to explain a little bit about it. The idea is, if we were in a room together, there might be somebody with a giant piece of paper at the side of the room drawing what's happening. And so what we're doing as we're listening to the people presenting, or the conversation, or the dialogue, or the strategic planning, is we are synthesizing and creating visuals in real time. And so obviously in the Zoom land now, we're doing the same thing. It's just different. We're doing it digitally. But the reason we use graphic facilitation is because it helps people. It helps people feel heard. It helps groups see what they mean. It helps people understand the path forward for planning. And so if you are also somebody that likes to doodle or think visually, this is definitely something that is available. And what happened was I went back to school, and somebody had said, you know, I think you should meet this colleague. And it was Avril Orloff, who is renowned in Vancouver. And, you know, we had lunch, and I was like, oh, she has the best job. She clearly has the only job. And I didn't think anything else of it, because obviously there was already somebody doing it. And what I know now is that kind of scarcity mentality isn't meaningful. It doesn't matter. And actually what's happened in the field of graphic recording and graphic facilitation is that it has spread everywhere. And so what used to be something that was for you know, like the Fortune 500 companies is now public sector, nonprofit sector, in higher education. And so in the before times, you know, I spent a lot of time in airports, a lot of time collaborating people in different countries. And now the path, if I look backwards, if I look back to see what enabled me to make that change, it's a couple of things, I would say. And the first thing was that I'm not really a fan of follow your passion. And it's such a scandalous thing to say, but actually, like, I was really influenced by this book by Cal Newport, and his book was called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And the thing that I want to say is get good and know what you're offering, because then when you're good,